Welcome and bienvenidos to Cultural Capacity, a podcast sponsored by Educator Aid Incorporated, where our team is committed to supporting individuals and organizations on their journey of self-aware leadership, emotional wellness, and development of effective cross-cultural communications. Let's get ready to explore the following topics together by biting into them with little pieces that go really deep to examine ourselves. Topics like bias, culture, cultural psychology, cultural neuroscience, diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial equity. Our episodes are all 10 minutes or less and intended to serve as introspective tools for you as the individual leader or the teams that you're leading. Be sure to check out the links in the podcast description where you can sign up for our free quarterly subscription, Better Community, as well as tap in and submit your questions via the voice message button. Let's get ready to learn together. Welcome y bienvenidos to the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I am your hostess of this particular episode, Justine Gonzalez, and I'm so glad that you're here. Please do know if you are hearing background noise such as roosters or wind blowing or birds chirping, it is because I am currently recording this while in Puerto Rico, but it also has to do with the topic of this episode. I would be remiss if I left the island to head back to the Chicagoland area without getting to record an episode as I just reflect and look out at the water from my balcony. And I'm just in awe with gratitude at even being able to make this trip and this journey. It is something that I have dreamed about since I was a little girl, and it has been quite an emotional experience at times. And quite a grounding experience at the same time. I want to talk a little bit in this episode, just briefly, about how to connect more deeply with your unique cultural origin story. Now, if you don't remember, one of my things, I am the founder of a company called Educator Aid Incorporated. You can check us out at educatoraid.com or click on the link in these show notes to subscribe to our free quarterly resources focused on cultural intelligence, the cultural capacity building towards empathy of other cultures different from our own, as well as some other key topics related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I'm saying all that to say a lot of what my lived experiences have to do with knowing who I am. And so much of our lived experiences, pardon the email alert, we keep it real here. We don't really go back and do a lot of sound editing, but part of our own lived experience is being able to share about that. And it's awfully hard to share about our own cultural origin stories or where we might feel most connected to God or nature or the universe in general or other people. It has a lot to do with actually becoming quite focused on learning about ourselves. We are often so fixated on others. I'm speaking to myself during this podcast recording, but I often find myself going into patterns where I am comparing or now being in the space of being a woman business owner and also Latina. And then you see other examples, right, of yourself, of who you are and who you're not. And I think I am continuing to learn that our best measuring stick is always going to be ourselves. And it's really important when we're talking about exemplars or a standard of operation or just living life in general, according to who, right? So when we say, well, I should be working more, I should be doing more this or that, according to who? And how deeply have you become almost obsessed with knowing yourself or knowing thyself? And one of my top 10 kind of sacred texts that I look to often is the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And I'm going to actually read an excerpt. I always like to share resources from texts with you all or current things that I find myself either embracing or even struggling through. It's all part of the journey. It's okay that there's going to be peaks, mountain peaks, and valleys. Um, but as I was pondering this the other day during some just meditation time, I landed on a version of the Tao Te Ching from Dr. Wayne Dyer. Now, if you don't know about him, he's actually published a lot of books, namely through Hay House Publications. A lot more spiritual and energetic in nature are his texts. But what he did, and I believe this was published, it's just a nice little book in 2008, meaning physically, it's actually a small book. You can put it in a purse, a bag. It's very light, and it can travel with you. He actually published a book called Living the Wisdom of the Tao. So it's the complete Tao Te Ching, but he's also taken it a step further with affirmation. So I'm going to actually be reading you all a very short verse. It's the 38th verse of the Tao Te Ching this morning. And again, as I consider even my own reflection on myself, if you remember, culture is norms, beliefs, values, our symbols, things that hold importance to us, as well as language. And language is not just solamente estoy hablando en español y también I'm speaking in English. No, it is how we communicate the language of love, our needs, conflict, and anger management, how we communicate effectively with personalities different than our own. You all know I could preach a sermon about that, but I'm always fascinated with wanting to understand people better, us, especially people who perhaps do not share my lived experience, because at the end of the day, each of us can only attest to one thing, and that is our collection of our own lived experiences. We can never be an expert at somebody else's life or world or their particular cultural origin. You can become an expert at understanding your own cultural origin story. So I invite you, I'm going to give you a couple ways that I suggest. First, kind of lower level ways of exploring your cultural origin story. You don't have to fly over all over the world like I like to do. But there are definitely some ways you can start to get more in touch with really the fabric of who you are, which essentially will build your self-awareness muscles. So I'm going to read to you again. It's called Living the Wisdom of the Tao, the Complete Tao Te Ching and Affirmations. And this was published by Dr. Wayne Dyer. Of course, the original Tao Te Ching was written by Lao Tzu. So this is the 38th verse. And this is what I've been pondering for the past week, actually. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness and is therefore good. A foolish man tries to be good and is therefore not good. The master does nothing, yet he leaves nothing undone. The ordinary man is always done things, yet many more are left to be done. The highest virtue is to act without a sense of self. The highest kindness is to give without condition. The highest justice is to see without preference. When the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality. When morality is lost, there is ritual. Ritual is the husk of true faith, the beginning of chaos. The great master follows his own nature and not the trappings of life. It is said, he stays with the fruit and not the fluff. He stays with the firm and not the flimsy. He stays with the true and not the false. Lots of poignant elements there, and why I've been going deep with this text over the past few days. But one of the biggest lines that actually sticks out to me is when it reads, when morality is lost, there is ritual. Ritual is the husk of true faith and the beginning of chaos. It's interesting how this concept of ritual, which is so much a part of organized religion, is denoted as the beginning of chaos. So I've been very challenged. Again, just wanted to hop on quickly. You will notice, and again, thank you for your subscribership, for sharing, for diving into your own personal learning journey. If you've listened and you've said, oh, this isn't really for me, well, that's okay. There's a lot of amazing podcasts out there. Maybe we will do an episode of just what are we listening to now. We do have a list of about 25 to 30 professionals across multiple sectors that are currently receiving some correspondence in the next week or so regarding their guest hosting position on this podcast. So we have many people lined up. We encourage you to hit that voice memo button, to ask a question or to email our team directly at educatораid@gmail.com to actually send in your episode. We plan to have many different hosts and hostesses throughout the life of this podcast, and we are just getting started. So we're glad that you're here. Thanks for listening to my ponderings as the wind blows and I look out to the Atlantic Ocean. I appreciate each of you for showing up for yourselves, and I wish you nothing but the best week in wherever portion of your week you happen to listen to this. Let's stay compassionately curious together. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself today and tuning in to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. We're glad you're here. If you found value in this episode, be sure to share out with your social networks. Hit the subscribe button and leave us a review on Apple. You know, all the things. Finally, don't forget to take advantage of our free quarterly subscription that is in our podcast description. The link is right there. It's called Better Community, and we would love to have you join us there too. Until next time, take care.